Hello everyone! Today I'm going to show you how to naturally dye fabric with avocado skins to create a beautiful soft pink. First, you want to collect enough avocado skins in pits. I keep them in the freezer until I have enough to make a dye bath with. Hot tip number 1, scrub your avocado skins underwater before putting them in the freezer or dye bath. This is best done fresh so the flesh doesn't dry out. I've heard that if you leave flesh on the skins or pits, it can make the dye more brownish. Second, you need natural fabric. Synthetic fibers don't dye well with natural dyes, so get yourself some cotton, bamboo, linen, hemp, silk, or wool. These are better anyways because, just a short little rant, microplastics have been found across the blood-brain barrier and scientists just really don't know what that means because it hasn't been studied. It's probably really bad. So just stick to natural fibers, it's better for your body and for the environment in my humble opinion. So once you have your fabric, you really want to make sure you scour and mordant. Scouring means using washing soda and hot water to remove any oil, lint, dirt, or just like gunk from the manufacturing process. So yes, scour even if your fabric is new. You'd be really surprised by the brownish liquid that comes out after scouring. And this process helps the fabric take up the dye better. The ratio of washing soda to fabric depends on what type of fabric you are using. I'm using cotton today, so the ratio is 1 to 2% weight of fabric. So about 1/4 to 1/2 teaspoon per 100 grams of fabric. If you don't have washing soda on hand, I really recommend getting some and making your own laundry detergent. It's super cheap and super easy. By the way, I'll put all of these ratios and links to products I use in the description below. So put that soda ash in a pot and gradually dissolve with boiling water, and then add your fabric and keep at 180 degrees Fahrenheit for 30 minutes. Then rinse your fabric in cool water. Next comes mordanting. If you aren't familiar with mordant, it's a compound that fixes the color of the fabric and prevents fading. When researching, I found some sites saying that for dyestuffs that have high tannin content, like avocado pits, you don't necessarily need a mordant. And maybe that's so for some people, but I tried to dye with avocado without first mordanting and I got a very underwhelming light peach color. If you really want all of your hard work to pay off, I highly recommend using a mordant. People also say that you can use vinegar or soy milk, but again, I tried and the color fades, it's just not as vibrant. Actually, in some traditional societies, they just re-dye their fabric every year or so, so that's an option if you don't want to use a mordant. But if you do decide to use a mordant, most people use something called alum for natural dyeing, which is just short for aluminum sulfate. You'll also see people using aluminum potassium sulfate, which contains the same active ingredient as alum, but it's just a different refining process. There are also a whole lot of other compounds that people use for mordanting, and they don't actually recommend aluminum sulfate for cotton, but that's what I use because I found a food grade aluminum sulfate and that just made me feel better. It's non-toxic, but you still don't want to put it into waterways because it can harm aquatic life. I've heard of some people putting it around acid-loving plants like hydrangeas or blueberries or rhododendrons, but you really have to be careful with that because too much can burn the plant. It is safe to put down the drain if you're connected to the municipal water system, and in fact they actually use it to purify water, but I haven't found any information about septic systems, so what I did was just poured a tad bit on all my acid-loving plants and then just put a little bit here and there away from water sources. And I've also heard that you can actually put some baking soda to neutralize the acid, but I wasn't able to find a ratio, so I didn't do that. I don't really think that you need to worry about it if you're just occasionally dyeing for personal consumption. All that being said, it is harmful if breathed in or if the fumes touch your skin, so it's always recommended to use eye protection and gloves and an apron, and even a respirator, as it can be harmful to mucous membranes. Once you have all of the proper safety equipment, add 12 to 15% of the weight of fabric of aluminum sulfate. So if your fabric weighs 100 grams, then you'd use 12 to 15 grams of aluminum sulfate. If you aren't mathematically inclined, I'll put that formula below. If you are using alum, you don't have to heat up the mordant bath. Some people heat it up to 180 degrees with the fabric in it and hold for 45 minutes, but I just didn't feel like dealing with that, and I read that cool water mordant baths work just fine with alum. So I decided to try it out, and it worked perfectly for me. I just added a little bit of warm tap water to a bucket and then added the alum and stirred with a stick. And make sure to do this in a ventilated area or just outside, and don't breathe in the dust or the fumes. Then add your fabric and stir every 15 minutes or so to evenly spread the solution on the fabric. You can mordant more fabric than you plan to dye and keep it around for up to a year or 2 before dyeing, depending on the type of fabric. Just dry it thoroughly so it doesn't mold. Some directions say an hour is enough in the mordant bath. Some people say to leave it overnight. I just left it to soak for a couple of hours and it seemed to work just fine. But maybe leaving it in longer leads to stronger colors. If you haven't noticed already, this whole process is very much amenable to experimentation. As a side note, some people even use a homemade iron bath as a mordant, where you soak rusty items in a 50-50 vinegar water bath for a couple of weeks to a month, depending on ambient air temps, and then add some strained liquid to water, some of the strained iron liquid to water, and then soak your fabric in that bath before dyeing. I tried this, but I didn't strain it because I didn't have a strainer that I wanted to dirty, and I ended up staining parts of my fabric with the flecks of iron, so I got kind of turned off from that, but I still have some sitting around that I want to experiment with in the future. It actually turned my golden onion skin dye into a beautiful olive green, but I'll save all of that for another video. Alrighty, so now that the prep is ready, it is time to make the dye bath. I basically just add enough water to cover the avocado skins and pits. But if your color doesn't turn out deep enough, maybe you need to use more avocados. Or, hot tip number 2, if you know or suspect that your water is acidic, then you can add some baking soda, about a 1/4 cup for an average size pot, and that can help deepen the color. Then you want to bring the liquid to a simmer, not a boil, because boiling can destroy the pink dye and leave you with a brown dye. So then simmer for about an hour and a half, and then add your dampened fabric and simmer for another 2 hours. Then turn off the water and let it sit for 24 to 48 hours. Then rinse out the fabric and put it through a normal wash and dry cycle, and you're done. And if you haven't already noticed, this whole process is very involved and time consuming. I don't recommend getting into it until you have all of the necessary equipment and setup, but once you do, it is very rewarding and it can lead to some just gorgeous colors. Alrighty, so here's the finished product. I think it came out really nicely. It's a beautiful blush color. And as a comparison, this is the fabric that I tried to dye without a mordant. You can really barely see any pink color. It mostly looks just white side by side. You can really see the difference, so I recommend using a mordant. Let me know if you have any questions, and best of luck in your dyeing adventures.